Toată lumea știe că viața oamenilor, a animalelor și a plantelor pe pământ nu ar fi posibilă fără apă. Chiar și atunci când caută urme de viață extraterestră, oamenii se uită mai întâi după urme de apă. Apa face posibilă viața. Și cu toate acestea, pentru că este încă ieftină și pentru că se găsește mai peste tot în România, nu ne prea batem capul nici să o economisim și nici să o prețuim la adevărată evaluare. Nu se învață la școală și rar în familii. Începem astăzi seria conversațiilor contemporane Habits.republica cu un interviu important. Oana-Martha Igrisan, fondator al Societății Omului Sănătos și creator al programului Habits, stă de vorbă cu doctorul Fatima Ajia, cercetător la Universitatea din Sheffield și coordonator al organizației Waterwise, cea care promovează și proiectează politicile publice legate de consumul de apă sustenabil din Marea Britanie. Sunt Alexandra Gătej, fondator al Societății Omului Sănătos și creator al programului Habits și vă invit astăzi să ne gândim împreună la apă, la cum să ne formăm obiceiul sănătos de a o prețui. Vizionare plăcută!
Good afternoon, Dr. Fatima Ajia. We'd like to start by saying thank you for being so kind to contribute to our mission here at Habits.republica, promoting healthy and sustainable ways of living.
Good afternoon, Oana. Thank you for having me.
In the first part of the year, we here at Habits.republica, our focus is going to be on sustainability and concrete ways of educating Romanian population, households, individuals, communities and companies to save energy, mainly water and heat. We feel that now is the right time to address this issue due to the need of change in our lifestyle driven by climate changes, as well as the increase of household costs here in Romania and in the rest of Europe. So let's start. Dr. Ajia, how do you save water in your home?
Thank you for such a warm introduction, Oana, and for creating a space to have such an important conversation about water efficiency. To answer your question about how I save water in my home, I think it's important that I give context around what my homescape looks like. Yes, because my homescape really plays a role in influencing when and how I use water, but also it influences the decisions and actions that I take to reduce water use. So basically, I live in a 3-bedroom home, which was built within the last decade. It has, the standard kitchen, toilets and bathrooms, and I have many houseplants. And I also have a front garden where I've been growing conifers, and I have a back garden where the last summer I grew vegetables. So you can begin to imagine all the many ways that I use water. So to use water sustainably in my home, I just do a couple of things. For example, in my kitchen, I would dissuade from sourcing for cold water directly from my tap. So I would put a glass bottle in my fridge permanently and I refill that, and that's where I get my cold water from. But also when I'm washing my fruits, my vegetables, my dishes, I now use a sink stopper. So I pop it down the sink drain, I fill my sink to a reasonably low level, and I do my washing there. So that prevents me from wasting water by washing under a running tap. But what I also do is I keep a kettle close by in my kitchen. And when you turn on the tap, Oana, when you need warm water, there's what I like to call the preceding cold water, which you're almost always tempted to just let it flow down the drain. So what I do is I collect that preceding cold water and I use it to water my conifers in my front garden, which is very close to my kitchen. And I also try to, wash on a full load. So I would pile up my laundry, and then when the laundry is full enough, the laundry basket, I do my washing. But what I also do is I try to invest in slow fashion. So I get a lot of wears out of my fabrics before I then eventually put them to wash. So that preserves the quality of my fabrics, but also helps me with saving water. And I do the same thing with the preceding cold water around the toilets and bathrooms in my home. So I have kettles all around. And when I do need warm water, I turn on the tap I collect the preceding water and I use it to water my houseplants. I do have many houseplants, and so that comes in very handy. But in my bathrooms as well, I have shower timers in all of my bathrooms. And that's a visual reminder when I'm having a shower that I need to jump out of the shower within 5 minutes, really. And also, because, as I said earlier, I live in a new home, so I'm very lucky. I have water efficient systems. I have the, door flush systems. I have the aerated taps, and I have a low flow shower head. But what I also do is, if I'm trying to brush my teeth, wash my hands, or wash my face, I make sure that I keep my tap turned off. I only turn on quickly when I want to wet and rinse. So I don't keep my tap running when I'm doing all of these things. But I also make sure I use my door flush buttons correctly. You do save a massive amount of water when you use the door flush button in comparison to when you just use the big button all the time. And also in my garden, I invested in water saving granules. So they're just tiny pebbles, really, that you drop in the garden. And what they do is they collect the rainwater when rain falls, but also when I pour water directly into the garden, they collect them and they release the water slowly to my plants. So I don't have that pressured need to water my garden directly from my tap, because the granules do that for me over a period of time. And I have my DIY water pots in my back garden. I collect water as well in the pots, and then I use them for my plants. So these are the little actions that I take that I think do create a massive impact. But there are also compromises that I'm making with saving water in my home, Oana. In the past, I would have very frequent baths to wind down after a long week. So on a Friday, that would be part of my routine. I'm making compromises, not having regular baths anymore. Now I'm having baths maybe once in 4 to 5 months. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make here is there are micro actions that one can take, but there are also compromises, big actions that one can also take to save water in a home. And saving water very often is very personal to you, depending on your lifestyle and your household space.
This is very useful, and I'm sure I will take a lot of your tips to my own home, especially with washing the fruits, which is an amazing tip. I will do it, and I will put my girls to do it as well. Thank you very much for sharing with us. I would like to ask you, what led you to focus on the field of water resource management? What made you study this?
I'd like to think really that, like many children, my initial critical interest in water was sparked by learning the water cycle. When you learn about the water cycle, all of a sudden that light bulb goes on, like, oh, there's more to water, isn't it? But really my technical engagement with water started as a teenager, because I studied geology at university, and hydrogeology was one of those subjects that I thoroughly enjoyed. And then for my first industrial work experience, I went off into a groundwater exploration company where we were exploring drilling for aquifers for drinking water, really. So it was a no-brainer for me, really, when I wanted to further my education, and the opportunity presented itself for me to study critically the influences of policy and practice in enhancing behavioral change in houses. I really just latched onto it.
Now we're going into more detailed questions. So I would like to ask you, why do you think is water scarcity a concern nowadays? Just for our readers and viewers to understand a bit more about this.
Water scarcity is a concern, not just in Romania, I have to point out. It's a global concern around the world. And I have to also reiterate that water scarcity can be created by a combination of different factors and can be unique to places. So in some places around the world, we would find water scarcity created because there's insufficient rainfall to meet the demand of population, so to meet the need of people when it comes to using water. But there are also some areas around the world where water scarcity is created because there's increasing level of usage amongst people. So people use more water than you would ordinarily expect, and therefore there's not enough water supply to meet that demand. But as we see in the global south as well, we do have some countries that really grapple with water scarcity because of poor water governance and also the lack of infrastructure to produce water in a potable form for people to be able to use it for their domestic purposes. So this is a real concern around the world, really. But we must not also forget that there's a lot of human activity that is underpinning water scarcity. So we find, the global population is growing, there's economic expansion, there is also urbanization, and, all of these things are driven by human activity, which puts pressures on, water resources around the world. There are countries really, for example, in Romania, the United Nations projects that, urban population will roughly remain the same by 2050, but rural population also might reduce. But that is not the problem creating water scarcity issues in Romania. The problem has to do with climate change and increasing demand, increasing, usage amongst people. So climate change in the sense that there are erratic weather patterns now, which I'm sure you must notice, Oana, with the number of tropical days in Romania are reported to be increasing. The number of wintry days are also decreasing. The average annual temperature is also increasing by 0.3 degrees centigrade. And then we're also having reports of low rainfall in the southern part of the country. So that's an issue creating climate change, specifically in Romania. But also urban usage of water in Romania is more than triple the level of usage in rural areas. So you have over 513 liters of water being used in the urban areas, and then you have 150 liters being used in the rural areas. Even in the rural areas, that 150 liters is just hovering around the European average, so it's not in any way low. So you do see that we have this responsibility as people to re-examine our impact on the wider climate, but we also have a responsibility towards water to examine how we use water, why we use water, and how we can do better.
Basically, that's what we are trying to do here, to tell people that there is a risk by not taking seriously the water usage. And usually in the big cities, people are completely without care about how they use water. But also in the rural part, it's the same, especially in Romania, because we always took water for granted, for example. But this is something that we need to change by informing our population that this is wrong. We cannot keep doing this. And that's why I would like to ask you, what are the individual and communities benefits of using water in an efficient way, just for the people to understand?
I think we all have a huge responsibility towards water, and we need to, of course, when water is readily available, we do as humans tend to take it for granted, but we also have to be reminded that water is a finite resource, so we can run out of water. And we've seen, around the world, like in South Africa, for example, where people have almost run out of water 3 years ago. So there are benefits to reducing our water use in our households, in our offices, in our workplace, in our schools and all of that stuff. First of all, the immediate benefits as individuals, we want to know, what is the benefit to me if I reduce my water use? It is true, when you reduce your water use, just look at your local rivers, you reduce the pressures on your water resources. Reducing your water use means that we would then need to abstract less from our local environment. So there's an environmental benefit to reducing your use, but there's also an economic benefit. I understand that water is very affordable in places like Romania, but that's not to say that you can't reduce your water bill. Of course you can. And in the same vein, you can reduce your electricity bill, which, as we know, recently there's been a fuel price hike, and that's affected how much we have to pay, right? And that hasn't necessarily meant that our disposable income have increased, right? So we can gain some financial benefits by reducing our water use, because for heating of your home, you require water to warm up your home. And a lot of us can't do without that. So if you make those changes on the water use front, you gain some financial benefits as well. But there are also intrinsic benefits, the feel good results that come for you doing something bigger for your environment, something for your community. It's a civic responsibility as well, not just for your immediate community, but for the future generations. We don't want to take actions that puts our future generations, our children and our grandchildren, at risk of not having sufficient water to meet their needs as well.
We have to see the big picture, basically, to not just today, but the big picture, to see the future in front of us. Do you think that it's the state or public institutions' responsibility to govern water usage, or does it fall to individuals' own responsibility? What do you think about this? Is it us, or is it also the state who has to take some responsibilities?
So I do think that water governance is not the sole responsibility of the state, neither is it the sole responsibility of we as citizens. So it is a collective responsibility to manage water. And the reason I say that is that water usage in itself is not just something that happens in isolation. It is the result of the interaction between people's social conditioning, their environments, their resources, technology, infrastructure, but even policies and regulations that are put in place to aid or impede usage, isn't it? Like I described with my usage around the house, there are a lot of things that affect how we use water. So I do think in this water system, there are many stakeholders, whether it is us as citizens, policymakers, government, or even housing associations, building home builders, and even product manufacturers. I think all of these stakeholders, we have responsibilities within our different capacities to advance the water efficiency agenda. So to think of it very simply, when you're using water, our usage really is influenced by our beliefs, our values, which then drives our lifestyle needs, isn't it? And when these behaviors become routine and regular over time, they become habits. So as citizens, we have that responsibility really to realign our habits to aid water efficiency. But also, there are all those external stakeholders, the product manufacturers, the policymakers, the home builders. They also need to realign their policies and practice to be able to make sure that we can be water efficient. So it's not just about our behavioral change, it's about a systems change, policy change. So what we need to think about is that water management is a collective responsibility, and it does take society as one to behaviorally and structurally position people to use water in a more efficient way.
Talking about responsibility, here is my favorite question because I can hardly wait for your answer. I would like to ask you, how can we teach our children to be mindful about efficient water usage?
Our children, aren't they so important? And they're at the forefront of this conversation, really, because the bigger picture is not just about us and what we need now. It's also about our children and they being able to use water. I think in a country such as Romania, and just in societies in general, where water is upheld as a human right and is readily accessible and is almost affordable, it is important that we dig deeper into social cultural interventions that we can use to, create this awareness about water amongst the young and amongst the old as well. So we can't leave out the old people as well. But with the younger people, I think it is important that we deliver water efficiency education to our children from a very early age so that they have an early years connection to water. And it's not just so that they have that connection. I think young people are strong influencers in households. So think about it. When young people know about a better way to do things, they challenge the adults in the home. They also share that knowledge very openly and very proactively. So then we have this thing where we have aware children, very aware children about water issues, who are then educating, older people as well. But I think educating young people is also very important for us to be able to break those intergenerational habits that have been handed down from old people to young people that do not actually serve water efficiency in any way. We need to find ways to break those chains, and one of that is through education. But we mustn't leave our older adults behind as well. I think that we can pursue water efficiency in spaces outside the home. So whether it is schools, institutions, workplaces, civic spaces where people congregate, community spaces. And I think it has to be a bottom-up and top-down approach where you have policies in these institutions and spaces to drive water efficiency, but you also have strategies to be able to connect people to water issues, but also make adults feel very responsible for their water, basically take ownership for their water inside the home and outside the home as well. Whatever we do, Oana, I do think that it's important that those strategies need to be very clear, and the messages as well need to be simple and appeal to people. So speak to people's interests, whether it's interest in saving money, saving the environment, the bigger picture. It has to appeal to people, to touch them, to want to take action. And I also think that this would have ripple effects. It would have ripple effects, especially in Romania, for example, where the leakage across the distribution network, there's a target to reduce it to 20% by 2025. So think about what education can do, but also what other strategies, social strategies, and technological tools can do to support people to meet that target.
In Romania, the most common way of living are in 40, 50 years old blocks of flats, gathering a large number of families together. The water supply is centralized. In your experience, what measures can these kind of families in this living condition take to be water efficient? Because it's difficult when you live in this kind of buildings.
I think that living in flats, especially flats with multiple occupancy, is very challenging for driving water efficiency. And, we do know that it's very difficult to install individual smart water meters for households in those flats. But it's not all gloom and doom. I think it's all gloom and doom if we think that water efficiency solely relies on the technology, the infrastructure to be able to make those changes. I think we need to pass more power to the people, equal power to the people. The power will pass to technology. We need to extend it to people to make micro changes. We need to make people aware that there are things they can do to be able to reduce their water use. And I'll just run through, in addition to some of the actions that I said I do take in my home, there are things that people can listen to and copy from those lists of actions. But particularly in flats with multiple occupancy, I would say that, start from the small things. Think about the spaces where you use water the most and the practices that you conduct to use water. It is known that the bathroom and the toilets are places where water gets used the most in the home. So I would say, first of all, the shower is a big win. How long do you shower? Have you even thought about it? How long do you shower for? And challenge yourself. Get a shower timer. It's literally very cheap on the market. It costs, a few pounds or so, and it's very popular. You stick it on your shower door. You can see it when you're showering. Challenge yourself to shower for less than 5 minutes. The optimum shower level, research has shown, is 4 minutes. So challenge yourself, see how short you can go with showering. But also look at your shower head. Have you paid attention to that? Whether it's I know people love to shower, with all the water gushing, but really you can get a low flow shower head where you still get the same level of satisfaction from having your shower, but you reduce your shower time from maybe the average traditional shower head is 15 liters per minute. You reduce it to 8 liters per minute when you have a low flow shower. Ring up your regional water company, actually. They might be able to offer you for free, or you might get it online, really. It's very cheap. Also, other things like when you're brushing or washing your face or, washing your hands, keep your taps turned off and just turn off on quickly when you want to wet and rinse. But if you want to even go further, you can invest in a brushing cup. A small brushing cup is really about 340 milliliters of water. And so that's all you need. You may not even use up to that when you're brushing, especially amongst families. It's very, engaging when you have brushing cups and everyone has their toothbrushes in there. But there are also other things you can do, whether it's in your flushing. I understand that these flats are quite old, so you might have the traditional flushing system. What you can do is ring your regional water company up and ask whether they can retrofit that system or refer you to a qualified plumber or technician. And really, it's very easy. It takes a few minutes, really. They drill into the siphon in your water system, in your toilet system, and then that turns the lever into a dual flush system. So automatically, you go from using 13 liters of water for flushing to using between 4 to 6 liters of water for flushing. That's a 50% reduction already. There are other things you can do, like I said, with the preceding cold water. Collect your preceding cold water and repurpose it around the house, whether you use it to water your plants or you use it for other things. But also with your plants, you can invest in drought-resistant plants where you don't need as much water to water them, even you don't have to water them as frequently as with, just other kinds of plants. But in the kitchen, invest in a plate scraper. Rather than soak your pots and pans and try to use water to soften them and get the sticky food off, you can actually just use a plate scraper to scrape the food off. That saves you some water. But you could also make sure that in the house, you use your dishwasher, if you have one, or you use your washing machine on a full load. Pile up your laundry, pile up your plates, and wash them on a full load. And if you live in a home where you have many people, right, you can have stickers. They're very cheap and accessible online on the market. You can have stickers on your washing machine that say, do not use except on a full load, right? I have it in my home as well for when I have guests, and it works wonders. People just stay away from the washing machine till it's full. So there are all those actions that you can take. And I think that the strategy is think about the space, think about the practice, and think about how you can reduce your use or even repurpose your water. I think one shouldn't wait till you have all the technology and the water meter to convince you that you can make a lot of savings by changing your behaviors. And they're small behaviors. And one thing I should mention as well, Oana, because in block of flats, you have families, you have multiple occupants. So you have this community really. Make water efficiency social. When you learn a new trick, when you change a new behavior, share it with your family, your children, but also share with your friends and your family members, extended family members, and your neighbors. There's a popular quote from an American cultural commentator, he's a social commentator as well. It's called David Brooks, that I like to refer to for water efficiency. He says his theory of social change is that society changes because a group of people find a better way to live, and then the rest of us copies them. So, that really brings to forefront the power of being social when you're trying to make change.
You were talking about a lot of habits, how to use water efficiently. I would like to ask you something for our viewers, because it's difficult to suddenly do so many changes. I would like to ask you, which are, in your opinion, the 3 most efficient, best habits for efficient water usage in the household. So just 3 for our viewers.
I think change is very gradual. Growth is a process. It's not a destination, really. So bearing that in mind, I would say my 3 strategies that I recommend, and I think they're quite popular strategies, is the reduce, reuse, and offset. And I'll explain what that means in practice for everyday life, really. The first thing that I would recommend is when you're trying to find a behavior to focus on and change, you can think about the space where you use water and think about a domestic practice that requires you to use water. And then you think, how can I reduce water use? So I'll take, for example, my bathroom. I shower every day. So that is where a key place where I use water. So I go, how am I going to reduce my water use in showering? I want to reduce my showering time, because if I do so, I use less water overall. And how do I do that? Is that I have the shower timer right in front of me, nudging me to get out of the shower within 5 minutes. So that's how I reduce. In terms of reusing, how can you reuse water in the bathroom? There are some people who have the infrastructure to collect the water from showering and then recycle it for a different purpose. But actually, you can also just make small steps where you collect the preceding cold water that I talked about and repurpose it elsewhere, whether you use it for your plants or you use it for cleaning or you use it for something in your outdoor space. That is still repurposing it, isn't it? And in terms of the offsetting, you can do that using technology, or you can do that by monitoring your leakage. And that is another nugget that I should give to people who live in flats and, with multiple occupants, and monitor the leakages around your home, because very often they are hidden and they are easy to just ignore. So you can either, for showering, you can say, well, I'm going to get a low flow shower head, and that's going to reduce my usage automatically by half, whilst I'm still trying to change my behavior. And also, when I turn off my shower, I would make sure that I close it tightly so that there's no drippings at all. And I'll check for leakages very regularly and report it to the facility manager or to my regional water company so that it can get addressed immediately. So those are my 3 strategies.
Thank you. So our last question is about the future of water in relation to human consumption. What do you see? How is the future?
I'm unable to predict the future, Oana. I don't have a magic glass hidden here somewhere, but I could tell you what the science says. If predictions from climate change scenario modelings are anything to go by, then we know that the balance between demand for water and availability will soon reach a critical level, not just in Romania, but in many European countries, right? So specifically in Romania, we know that there are projections that have been published to suggest that there's water supply vulnerability in the Oltenia Plain, for example, or even there are projections predicting increasing levels of urban and rural usage, and also water shortages in the Timis Plain. So we know that this is coming, and if nothing is done, this is the problem that we are facing. Water scarcity is a daunting challenge. So those are things that I can tell you that the science says. And if nothing is done, I can tell you what would happen. You would have this increase in, already we have a high level of demand in Romania, but then what we would have is this increased level of demand, right? And in response to that, we would have policy mechanisms, but also price mechanisms to almost regulate and restrict people into being water efficient. And in societies where, water is upheld as a human right and democratic water governance is encouraged, I think this would not be highly welcomed. It could be deemed as unfair and draconian. So our responsibility as citizens is to prevent this from happening, isn't it? It's for us to look inwards and look around us, look at those measures that we can implement now to address the problem of water scarcity.
I would like to thank you so much for your contribution to our mission here at Habits by Republica. And I would also like our viewers to think about the big R that came to my mind listening to you, which are be responsible, reduce water usage, and try to reuse as much as you can. So thank you very much. It was an honor for me to talk to you. There were so many things I learned from you, and I'm sure that our viewers also. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Oana. It's a pleasure.
Vă mulțumim că ne-ați urmărit, sperăm că v-a fost de folos și vă invităm în comunitatea noastră a Societății Omului Sănătos.